How is everybody doing this morning? Doing good? How many of you guys were excited to get some snow this weekend? Nope. A couple people. That's cool. We went out in the snow for like 5 minutes, and then I was like, no. I'm ready for the summer. I'm over this. But hey, it's so good to see you guys this morning. If we haven't met before, my name is Cotter, and I'm the Next Steps pastor here at Bay Shore. And man, so good to see you guys. We also have our online family joining us this morning. If you're new to Bay Shore, we are one church. We've got 4 locations. So we've got our basement here in Rehoboth. We've got our original campus in Millsboro. We've got our Fenwick campus. And we also have our online family that joins us every Sunday through Facebook, through YouTube, through the podcast. So can we get loud for our online family this morning? So a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go see my niece Lainey play basketball with her varsity basketball team. And Lainey, you guys have seen her. She's usually up here playing keys for us this morning. And so she's a freshman in high school, and she is playing on her varsity basketball team. She's playing volleyball. She does worship, leading worship music at her school. She's just absolutely killing it. And so I got to go see her play basketball a few weeks ago, and man, it brought back so many memories of playing sports when I was growing up. I think my parents, when I was growing up, had me in sports from when I was 3 years old all the way up. Me and my siblings, we just grew up on the soccer fields over in Seaford by the Boys and Girls Club. Every Saturday, that's where we were. Who else remembers playing sports when you were growing up? Man, those are good memories, right? Hopefully those are some good memories. I love playing sports growing up. I hated baseball. Baseball's the worst. Just not a fan. I was fine if they stayed in the lockout, but no, I love playing soccer growing up. I love playing basketball, but my parents had me in so many soccer leagues, all kinds of leagues. We were in the regular Parks and Rec leagues. They had me on 7-on-7 teams, indoor teams, travel teams. I played so much soccer growing up, and I was thinking about how much soccer I played growing up, and I was kind of wondering if my parents had me in so many leagues because they just wanted me out of the house, getting my energy out somewhere other than inside. And so we've got a picture we can toss up from when I was super young playing soccer. All right, so this guy on the left, that's my boy Neil. We were neighbors, really good friends. I'm this goofy looking kid on the right. See those teeth? That's a ridiculous picture. So that was me growing up. Those are those fields over in Seaford, and so I played from when I was super young all the way up through middle school and high school. We got a picture of me when I was in 8th grade playing with my brother. So my brother's the normal looking one, and I am looking like that. So I got the braces, which matched my jersey, so I had the style thing going on. And look, man, it was the early 2000s. So if you weren't listening to punk rock music and bleaching your hair, I don't know what you were doing. You were missing out. So, and I guess the other thing I was doing was, cutting my hair myself with scissors, because that's the worst haircut I think I've ever seen in my whole life. But man, I've always loved playing soccer my whole life, and since my parents had me in a million soccer leagues, I got pretty good at it. And so I played in travel leagues, then they had me in these leagues called carded leagues, which are a little higher than travel. The competition was pretty high, and then so we play in those most of the year, but in the springtime, the only league that there was available to play in was the local Parks and Rec League. And the competition was a little bit different in the local Parks and Rec League than it was in the travel leagues, because the Parks and Rec Leagues were a bunch of kids that had no interest in soccer at all. They felt the way about soccer that I feel about baseball. They were just there because their parents dropped them off, and they couldn't wait to get back home. And so this one spring, I was playing in the Parks and Rec League with some of my friends from travel soccer, and you didn't get to pick what team you're on, but they put all of us travel kids, or a few of us, on the same team, and so we were just destroying everybody. We were beating them so bad. We were scoring so many goals that our coach actually pulled us over, and he's like, hey, you have to pass the ball 15 times before you shoot because you guys are scoring too much and the other team's getting mad. And so it was just, that whole spring, like it was just kind of unfair. I felt bad for like the kids on the other teams because we had a bunch of people that loved playing soccer, and you could tell they were upset. They're just like, this is not fun. It's not fair. I don't really want to be here. And isn't it true that when things aren't fair in life, it can be like super frustrating? It can just get so old. Now, thankfully, I was on the good end of the unfairness in that situation, so I didn't mind it then. But there's a lot of times in life where we're on the wrong end of situations that just don't feel fair. And experiencing unfairness in life, that can just be such a major bummer. And so today, we're going to check out a story that Jesus shared about some workers that felt like they were not treated fairly. So we're going to be hanging out in the book of Matthew this morning. We're going to be in chapter 20 all morning long. And we'll have our verses on the screen. But if you need a Bible, we've got free Bibles out in the lobby on the same table as the coffee. If you found the coffee, you can find the free Bible. So make sure you grab one before you leave, but we'll have everything up here. So we'll start out here in Matthew chapter 20 with verse 1. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard." So what we're seeing here is a parable that Jesus is sharing with his disciples. And so a parable, that's like a weird word, but a parable is a story that Jesus shared in order to communicate a spiritual lesson. And so there's something that Jesus wants his close followers to understand, and he's using this story to explain it to them. And so in this parable, we see this landowner, and he needs to find workers for his vineyard. So he goes out early in the morning to find some workers, and he finds some people who will work, and he agrees to pay them a denarius. Now, that's another weird word. And what a denarius means, that's like a full day's worth of wages. So he hired them right when the day started, and he said, hey, if you work for me all day, I will pay you a fair amount. I'll pay you for a full day's worth of work. And so they agreed to work. They went out. They started working. And let's hop back in with verse 3. We'll put this up on the screen. So it says, about 9 a.m, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right. So a few hours passed. The vineyard owner, he went back out, and he went to find some more workers. And this time he told them that he would pay them whatever was right. So with the workers that started at the beginning of the day, he said, hey, I'm going to pay you for a full day. And then he went out a few hours later, and he just told them, hey, I'll pay you whatever is right. I'm not going to guarantee you what I'm going to pay you. And so they were fine with that. They went out and they worked. And so Jesus continues in this parable, and he shares that this landowner, he goes back out again a few more times to hire workers. So the first workers were hired at 6 a.m. These guys were hired at 9. Then he went out again at noon, again at 3 in the afternoon, and again at 5 in the afternoon, each time hiring workers for his vineyard. Now, the workday at this time was pretty intense. It was 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. And so by the end of the day, this vineyard worker had guys who were working for 12 hours, some who worked for 9 hours, some who worked 6, some who worked 3, and some who only worked that last hour of the day. So when the day ended and it was time for him to pay the workers, these are kind of interesting. So let's check this out. We'll move up to verse 9. We'll put this on the screen. It says the workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon, so like 1 hour before the end of the workday, the workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those who came, who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. So the people who worked for 1 hour were paid the exact same amount as the people who worked all day long. Somebody say, that ain't right. Right? Like, I would be pretty upset, I think, if I was one of those workers. You know, that had to be kind of frustrating to start at 6 a.m. and then these people that came right at the end of the day barely got their hands dirty, and they made the same amount of money. And so they were pretty upset about that. And I think this parable is really cool, and there's so many things that we can take away from this story for our lives. But growing up, how many of you guys had a best friend? Best friend, everybody. That's pretty awesome. So my best friend growing up was my brother. And so my brother Kyle, he's like three and a half years older than me. And so we were super close in age, and we were always interested in the same stuff. We both loved sports, we loved video games, we loved the beach, and he was my older brother. So if there was something he was interested in, there's a pretty good chance that I was interested in it too. And so we were always playing hockey and basketball together and shooting each other with Nerf guns and just, hanging out like all the time. And so we grew up, and then when he graduated high school, he went off to college in Virginia. And so he was there for a few years, and then he found a job out there after he graduated. And so he's kind of stayed out there and lived out there. So we haven't gotten to see each other as much recently. But a few years ago, my grandparents, they were what do all grandparents do in the spring? They go to Florida, right? And so that's what my grandparents were doing. So they were talking about this trip, and man, they were nonstop talking about it. They were going to this place that was amazing. It was this resort. It had like 10 pools. It had a jacuzzi in every room. It had a kitchen in every room. There were not one, but 2 lazy rivers at this resort, because one lazy river just isn't enough laziness for a resort. So they were going to this place, and they kept talking about how amazing it was, and we were like, yeah, that sounds so awesome, have fun, and we'll just be here in the cold working. And so I don't know what gave them this idea, but one day my grandparents decided that they wanted to pay for my brother and I to go down to Florida with them for a whole week. And when they told us that, I was like, are you serious? You really want us to come down there and hang out with you for a full week? And so I asked them like 5 times if they were serious, because I was super broke at the time. Like, I had just finished college. I could barely afford my loans and my gas. I could not afford a plane trip to Florida, but they were serious, and so they paid for my brother and I to fly down there. And man, that week was like one of my favorite memories of my entire life. We were just hanging out there. We were chilling in all of the lazy rivers. We were throwing footballs to each other off the balcony and playing Xbox and just having so much fun. And it was just a whole week of like not spending any money and just having no worries, just hanging out in sunny Florida. And I think back to that trip, and like, I did nothing to earn that week in Florida. I couldn't afford that trip on my own. I didn't do anything for my grandparents in return. I was just on the receiving end of this like amazing, incredibly selfless gift that I didn't deserve. And now look back with me to this parable. We'll put verse 9 back on the screen. So this says, the workers who were hired about 5 p.m. came, and each received a denarius. So like we said, a denarius, that's a full day's worth of pay. That's 12 hours worth of pay. And these guys only worked 1 hour. And that's amazing. They were given this incredibly selfless gift. They were given something that they totally did not deserve. And remember, this story that Jesus is sharing, this is something that he's sharing with the purpose of communicating a spiritual lesson to us. And when he began telling this parable, he said that it was a way to explain the kingdom of heaven. And that's a fancy way of just saying that he was trying to explain why he came to the earth. He was trying to explain salvation. And so Jesus shared this story to explain what he's done for us, to show us the undeserved gift that we've been given. Look, when Jesus came to this earth and he lived here on this earth, he lived his whole life perfectly. He obeyed all of God's commands. Not once did he mess up. He told people about God. He loved the people around him. And then at the end of his life, he gave up his life so that his perfect life, his perfection could cover all of our sin. All the times that we've messed up, all the times that we have lied, or times that we've lost our temper, or times that we've been prideful, all of that is sin. And Jesus gave up his life of perfection to cover all of our mistakes. And I remember when I was in college, there was a pastor who shared a really great image of this. And he said that when we place our faith in Jesus, what happens is that God looks at us, and instead of seeing our past, instead of seeing all the times that we've made mistakes, all the times that we've messed up, God doesn't see that. When God looks at us and we've placed our faith in Jesus, he just sees Jesus' perfection. Putting our faith in Jesus is like putting on this like a white robe of perfection. So when God looks at us, that's what he sees. He sees perfection because of Jesus. So in this parable, Jesus is explaining to us that We are these workers who slept in, were lazy all day, didn't do anything, and then we showed up to work super late, and yet we've still been given this full gift of salvation because it's a free gift from God. Look, salvation isn't something we can earn. Salvation isn't something that we can work for. It's just something that's given to us freely when we choose to accept it and choose to live for God. And I think back to that trip that my grandparents gave my brother and I, like one of the most amazing weeks of my whole life. And I remember the day that I was leaving to get on the plane to go down to Florida, and it was super early in the morning, and I was sitting on my futon, like, guys, I was broke. I was sitting on a futon. We didn't even have a couch. And so I'm sitting on this futon, and I'm looking at my phone, and it was, the temperature outside was 0 degrees in Salisbury. And so then I went over to the airport, and if you guys have ever flown out of the Salisbury airport, it's a little sketchy. And so you like walk out to the plane, and there's ice all over the ground as we're walking onto the plane. And then like a couple hours later, I'm chilling in a lazy river in sunny Florida. Like, it was completely amazing, and I didn't do anything to earn that. I didn't deserve it. It was this amazing gift that I was given by my grandparents because they loved me and my brother. They wanted us to have this amazing time. They wanted us to be happy. And look, that's what salvation is. It's not something we've earned or something we deserve. It's something we're given because of how much God loves us and how he desires for us to have a fulfilling life now, a full life now, and an eternal life in the future. And so we are these workers that haven't earned our wages. You know, we can look at the story, and I think my first takeaway from the story usually is, man, that's not fair that these people got paid the same amount, but when we think about it, we are those workers. And at the end of the day, we don't deserve this amazing gift that we're given, but even though we don't deserve it, Jesus loves us so much that he wants us to have it, and he wants us to have this incredible opportunity, this incredible salvation because of his love for us. So in this parable, we see that the landowner was super generous. He gave more than what was earned, and when we continue reading, we'll see something else that he was focused on. But before we get back into those verses, I need to know, how many of you guys have siblings? Like a brother or sister, or maybe like a cat that your parents really liked? So I've been blessed with a couple siblings, my oldest sister Katie, and then my brother Kyle. And so my sister Katie, she came first, and then it was my brother, and then me. So I was the last one. Now, it's great having siblings. It's not always great being the youngest sibling. And a perfect example of this was when we were growing up, the chores that our parents would have us do. Both of our parents worked like super hard, so they were working like 5 or 6 days a week, and so they had us as kids do 15 minutes of cleaning around the house. And so they called it our 15 minutes. Every day it was like, hey, did you guys do your 15 minutes? And so we just did 15 minutes of cleaning around the house, anything that would help out, scrubbing toilets, sweeping the floor, doing the dishes. And so since I was the youngest, I didn't really get to pick the chores that I did. You know, usually we did it after school before my parents got off work. And so my sister chose what she wanted to do. My brother chose what he wanted to do. And I was upstairs scrubbing the toilets most days. So, it was fun though. You know, we always had our like 15 minutes. And so as we grew up, my brother and I, we were awesome at our chores. We were always doing them. We were always on top of it. But my sister, since she was the oldest, and who else in here is the oldest kid in the family? Okay, so maybe you guys can relate to this. As she got older, she kind of came to this conclusion that she was awesome and that she was too cool to do her 15 minutes like her younger siblings. And so since she was the oldest sibling, she just started making up her own rules. And so she would tell my brother and I, hey, you guys need to go scrub the toilets. You need to go do the dishes. And then her 15 minutes would happen like once every 3 months. And her version of cleaning and working hard was to go in the pantry and eat Pringles. And because she said she was rearranging the pantry and cleaning it. So she'd move some cereal boxes around and eat some Pringles, and that was her chores for the next 3 months. And so it was kind of ridiculous. Now, where are the youngest kids at? All right, look, I believe, I'm the youngest, and I believe that as the youngest kid, you have a duty and maybe a responsibility to just be a gigantic whiner, like all the time. Like, I think you just have a responsibility to whine about everything. And I, as the youngest, I took that responsibility very seriously. And I never missed an opportunity to complain about something or to tell my parents, hey, I'll tell you who actually did their 15 minutes today while you guys were working. And so, man, I would get so annoyed when things weren't fair growing up. And I would always, my parents would get home from a long day of work. I'd say, hey, so I scrubbed the toilets and I swept the floors and Katie ate some cereal and talked to her friends on the cordless phone. So that's kind of how it would go. I would just get so frustrated when things weren't fair. And so we saw in this story that the landowner was very generous. And we can also see in this story that he made sure that the rewards were all equal. He gave the same reward to everyone that worked in his vineyard. And that didn't make everyone happy. Just like I wasn't too psyched when my sister was chilling while I was scrubbing the dishes. These workers who started the day and worked for 12 hours, they got really upset when they made the same amount of money as the people that only worked for 1 hour. But the landowner, he was the one in charge, and he got to choose what the workers were paid. So look at this verse with me. We'll toss verse 14 up on the screen. It says, this is a landowner talking to the angry workers after they got paid the same amount. He says, take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. So he chose to pay all of the workers the same wages. And in his mind, he saw what they had done for him. And even though he gave them different responsibilities, different tasks, some to work 12 hours, some to work 1 hour, they all accomplished what he asked them to do. And so he felt it best to pay them the same. And here's what's important for us in this. Because remember, this is Jesus trying to share a spiritual lesson with us. And what Jesus wants us to see from this is that everyone who places their faith in Jesus is given the same salvation. There are not different levels of salvation. If you've been saved for 75 years, or if you've been saved for 15 minutes, you have the exact same salvation. If you believe Jesus is the Lord of your life, you have the same salvation. Doesn't matter if you got saved in 1925 or if you got saved during worship this morning. And look, that can be hard to understand. I grew up in a house where I knew about Jesus like before I knew my ABCs. I've never known Sundays as not being about church. I've always had a good understanding of God's love for me, but that's not everyone's story. Some people come to the Lord later in life. Some people just walked into church this morning and you never heard Jesus' name before. And we all have a different story, but what Jesus wants us to see is that in this parable, some of the workers were in the vineyard all day, and others were only there a short time. Some of us have been Jesus followers for a long time. Others have been Jesus followers for a very short time. And what we need to see is that we have the exact same salvation if we believe in Jesus. He gives us all the exact same grace. So somebody who's been a Jesus follower for 50 years, they're not more saved than someone who just made that decision last week. We're all given the same salvation and the same grace. And there's a really cool verse in the book of Romans that we can see about this. This comes from Romans 10. I love this. It says, the same Lord is Lord of all and richly blesses all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Who's saved? Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord. And not just some, not just those who haven't missed a Sunday at church, not just those who have reached the 20-year milestone. No, everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. And God has the same grace for each in every one of us. It's not handed out in measures based on how long we've been saved. It's not handed out in measures based on our past. So if you feel like, man, my past is so messed up and there's no way I've got the same grace as somebody else, that's not how it works. It is the same for all of us, no matter our past, no matter how long we've been saved. It is full and it's complete. And Jesus' forgiveness is for everyone who calls on his name. So we've been given salvation even though we didn't earn it. We've all been given the same full grace, but even though we've all been given that same grace, it's easy for us to get distracted. It's easy for us to take our eyes off of what Jesus has done for us and to start focusing on all of the people around us. Look, when I was doing my 15 minutes growing up, I was not focused on getting done what my parents had asked me to do. I was just keeping a list of all the things my brother and sister weren't doing so I could report out on that when they got home. I was so focused on that, and isn't it true that it's so easy for us to get distracted by the people around us? You know, we get so caught up in how people are acting, how people are talking to us, how people are treating us, what people think about our decisions. And we spend our time focusing on what other people have, what their lives look like on social media, what kind of possessions they have, what car they have. And we get so focused on all of this other stuff that involves other people, and we lose sight of what God has called us to live for. We lose sight of what he wants us to be focused on. And we see from the workers in this parable, they got caught up in that exact same thing. Let's look back at these verses, starting at verse 9. It says, the workers who were hired about 5 PM came and each received a denarius. So when those who came, who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. We'll go to the next slide. It says, when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. So these workers had been out in the vineyard all day long. They started bright and early. They worked through the heat of the day. They kept going all the way until the work was over. And then when the day was over and all the workers lined up to get their pay, these guys, they were last in line. And so they're seeing what everybody else is getting. And so they're like, oh, those are the guys from 5 o'clock. They made what we were promised. Oh, those are the guys from 3 o'clock. And all the way through, they see everybody made the amount that we were promised. We're about to have a huge payday. Like, we're going to get paid so much money. And then they get up there and the landowner's like, no, you get the exact same as everyone else. And even though that's the amount that they were promised when they started out the day, they got super upset. They could not understand how they were being the same amount as all the other people who were lazy and who showed up late. And so they were complaining and they were angry. They were so focused on what the other workers had received that they couldn't appreciate what they'd been given. And if you think about it, they woke up that day without a job. They woke up that day without any source of income. But then the landowner came. He gave them a chance to work. He promised them a full day's wages. And at the end of the day, they were so distracted. And they were just complaining. They took their focus off of what they were asked to do. They took their focus off of their blessings, and they started looking around at the other people, and they started getting really upset. And I think it's easy for us to get distracted as well. It's easy to get frustrated and to get discouraged when we start looking around at the people around us and focusing on their lives, whether it's what they say or what they do. It's easy to get worked up about the lives of other people. And that's how we get distracted. That's how we lose sight of what our focus should be on. And that's what happened with these workers in the vineyard. They lost sight of their task because their eyes were wandering. And here's what we should learn from their example. Our focus should be on Jesus. Our focus should not be on the people around us. And I want to show you this verse from Colossians chapter 3. We'll put this up. It says, whatever you do, work at it with your whole being for the Lord and not for men. So whatever we do, who are we working for? The Lord. And who are we not working for, whatever we do? Man, we're not working for other people. No matter what we're doing, we are working for the Lord. Look, we live for Jesus, and we get our approval from Jesus. We get our satisfaction from Jesus. We get our security, and we get our hope and our motivation from Jesus. We get our peace from Jesus. Look, when you wake up tomorrow, Monday morning, bright and early, whatever it is that you do, whether you are going to work a job, whether you're staying at home with your kids, whether you're staying at home with your aging parents and taking care of them, whether you are retired and you're just going to go hit the golf course, whatever you do tomorrow with your time, you are working for the Lord. And your motivation is to give 100% effort for Jesus. And when you get home at the end of the day, your satisfaction and your comfort, it comes from knowing that God sees you. Look, your boss may not see you, How many of you guys believe that? Your boss may not see what you're doing. They may not see how hard you're working. They may give promotions to your coworkers and raises to your coworkers and not even acknowledge you. But guess what? You're not working for your boss. You're working for Jesus. And if you're staying at home watching your kids, taking care of them all day, homeschooling them, or taking care of your aging parents, man, it may feel like nobody else sees what you're doing. It may feel like nobody else values what you do or understands what you do. And while other people may not see it, God sees it. God sees everything that you do. And the workers in the vineyard, man, they lost sight of this. When they went up there to collect their paycheck, they just got frustrated about how much money the other people were making. They had taken their focus off of their task. They had taken their focus off of the landowner, and they just started looking around at all of the other people. And you know what that left them feeling? It left them feeling empty. It left them feeling frustrated and disappointed. And I really believe that that's how we feel when we take our eyes off of Jesus. When we forget that it's Jesus who we're living for, that it's Jesus who we're waking up for, that it's Jesus who we're going to work for, it is so easy to get discouraged. And so, while it's tempting to get distracted by the people around us, our satisfaction, that comes from God alone. Our effort each day, that is for God alone. So know that He sees you. He sees all of your effort. Now let's check out this last verse. This is verse 16, and this is what Jesus uses to kind of wrap this story up. It says, "So the last will be first, and the first will be last." Now, if you are a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, we don't shout you out a lot, but the last will be first. This is for you guys right here. I'm just messing with you. Look, if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, that's cool. You can find another church. That's great. But no, these words are what Jesus says to kind of wrap up this parable. And He tells this whole story, and then He sums it up with this line, that the last will be first and the first will be last. And look, here's what Jesus is saying. In this life, there is constant pressure on us to accumulate more money, to accumulate more possessions, to be popular, to be successful, to be admired. But what matters the most is not the stuff that we accumulate in this life. What matters the most is what we're living for. Jesus shared this parable with His disciples, men who had given up absolutely everything just to follow Him. They had given up their possessions. They gave up their jobs and their families just to follow Jesus. And so in the eyes of others, these disciples, they had nothing to offer. They didn't have a job. They didn't have any possessions. But you know what they had? They had faith. They had a relationship with Jesus, and that has more worth than any job. It's got more worth than any accomplishment, any material possession that we could get. The most valuable choice that we can make in life is to place our faith in Jesus and to live for Him. Look, we've all been given salvation, even though we haven't earned it. We've all been given the same full grace that covers all of our sin, and that salvation is the most important thing in life. So while we may be last in life, we may have less money than other people, we may have an older car than other people and a smaller house than other people, but if we have salvation, then we have what really matters. And look, if you haven't made that choice to live for Jesus before, make today the day that you choose to live for Him. Make today the day that you accept His free grace, that you accept His forgiveness and place your worth not in your accomplishments, not in your past, but in God and in what He has done for you. We're going to close out with a song this morning, but hey, if you want to make that decision for Jesus today, please see somebody from our band or our worship team or anybody on our staff. Look, God loves you, and He gave up His whole life just to give you salvation. Even though we didn't deserve it, He did that for us because of how much He loves us and because He wants to bless us. Let's pray. God, I thank You so much for today, and I just thank You for how great You are, man. We don't deserve anything, and You have given us so many blessings in life, God, and I thank You for Your love for us. I thank You for how much You care for us and how You invest in us, and God, I pray, Lord, that we would appreciate what You've done for us. I pray that if anybody here hasn't made the decision to follow You, that they would see how much You love them, I pray that they would feel your grace and your forgiveness in their lives. And I pray that they would not let their past hold them back or what their opinion of themselves is hold them back. I pray that they would see how great you are and how much you love them and how much you value them. Pray all this in your name. Amen.